It's early morning and I'm drinking coffee. It's very, very overcast. It's been raining, and in the quiet and the semi darkness of the morning, I want to do another entry. This would be entry or episode 4 into My Father's Tales. Everyone likes to talk about their parents and the things that they did and the relationship they had with their parents and so forth. It's what we do. But as we are in lockdown in this month of April in 2020 because of COVID-19, the pandemic, I thought it a really good time to talk about my father and some of his tales. When my father passed away in 2001, he and my mother had already gone on before him, and but they had a house. There's a lake in Texas called Lake Whitney, and my dad and Gary helped a lot. Built a house there. It wasn't a huge house. It had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. In the bathroom, it had a claw tub, which I'll get to that later. Uh, a clawfoot tub, the heavy cast iron kind of deep tub that takes a ton of water to fill, the old-fashioned kind of tub. But he also had 3 boats there. One was a cabin cruiser. It wasn't a big cabin cruiser, but it was a cabin cruiser. One was basically designated as a fishing boat for him. He and Gary, my husband, loved to fish together. They were great fishing companions, and the rule was my dad's rule was you had to hit it early in order to when the fish would be biting. And that was not a problem for Gary because he's an early riser. So they would leave these god awful hours to go fishing. And the thing about my dad was he liked fish. He did in his younger days. He took it very seriously and fished like a crazy man. And but when he went with other people, when he was the host for other people, he wanted to make sure they had a good time. And he did everything. He wanted them really to be the ones to catch the great fish. And my dad, when the fish were caught, he could scale a fish faster than anything. And as a kid, we had a little instrument. It was about the size of a potato peeler in our utensil drawer, and it had these little jagged things on it, kind of like a shark's teeth. And as a kid, I always found it, what is this? It's so weird. Every time I took it out of the drawer, and I liked to kind of play with it. But it was a fish scaler, and he could scale those fish like nobody's business, fast, 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 and clean the fish and fillet the fish like no one else. Where there would rarely be would you ever find a bone. Here and there you would find a bone, but it was rare. And but if he didn't want to take the time, if he knew pretty much, and he loved to give big fish fries with the fried potatoes and the hush puppies in the works. And he also likes barbecue, but that'll be a separate entry. But if he thought that he and my mother would just be making these fish for a dinner, for them, he didn't bother to fillet them. He would just uh, freeze them in a way that you could easily separate them without tearing them up. But if we happen to be there, Gary and I, or even me as a kid, my father could eat like Felix the cat. If you're familiar, there's a Felix the cat, which I haven't seen in 100 years, but would put the fish in his mouth, pull it out, and all the fish bones, he would pull it out by the tail. All the fish bones were intact. That was my dad didn't eat it like that, but he could eat around fish bones like and leave it like perfectly. Eat on one side, flip it, eat it on the other side. It was amazing to see the fish bones when he would be finished with them. But this brings me to my father's love of nautical things. As a kid, he had a he had two boats. One was a Chris Craft, a speedboat, and I do mean speed. And the other, it was inboard, outboard, and absolutely gorgeous, long, sleek, trimmed in red. Uh, Chris Craft, the kind, the classic kind. They're classic now. That was the speedboat, and it held quite a few people, actually. And my dad had all of the things you need: the skis, the boards, and many of his friends would ski. My father only used one ski slalom. He only used one ski when he skied. And some of his friends skied barefoot. My dad did not do that, but he only used one. He never used two. And I just have these visions of my dad. I can see him in my head, how he would lean back, just lean into it. And my mother did not want to ski, did not ski, but water ski, but she could drive that boat. She could drive any vehicle, let me tell you, because he was a great teacher. And she could drive that boat for him or for anyone else to ski. And he would just lean back into the ski and never fell. I never saw him fall. And he would just let go and sink into the water, and my mom would swing around and pick him up. And he also loved to ski on these little boards. Back then, I don't know what they would have been called, really. They were a little small disc. I believe disc is what they called it, skiing on a disc. And they were small, and he loved to ski on that because he was kind of a daredevil. He really, really was. He would push the limits. And he would, well, I want to get back to him never falling. There is an addendum to that. But he would, when we would go to the different lakes, he would, and he had certain ones that were his favorite. There was one in the Fort Worth, Texas area called Eagle Mountain Lake, and it's a beautiful lake, and he and Gary fished that lake a lot, and that was his favorite lake to ski on. It's big, lots of room to ski fast, to go fast, safe, very safe. He was very, very conscious, life jackets, the works, very, very safety conscious, but he was still a daredevil. When we would drive, on a Sunday, if he didn't want to get on the lake, he would drive around the lake, and he would uh, drive really fast and would be in the back seat up to what I thought, especially being the really young kid, to the edge of the lake, going in the lake, and then he would put the brakes on and scream, and he loved doing that. So he loved to, to do things to freak you out a little bit, but yet very, very safety conscious of, of me and my sister. But back to the falling part and how he never took a spill. Rarely did I see. Well, really, truly, honestly, I never saw him fall when he was skiing. Never. But I came home from school one day, and he was in the kitchen, and he was sitting at the kitchen table, and he was wrapped up. His upper torso was all wrapped up, and he looked awful. He looked really miserable. Well, what had happened was the prior weekend, the day before, really, he had fallen. He had been skiing on the disc, and he had taken a really bad fall, and he had broken a rib. and he was in agony, and he had been uh, to the emergency room, and he did not require uh, hospitalization, but he couldn't move. He could hardly breathe, and my dad was tough as nails, and he never complained. And so to see him actually grimacing when he took a breath, it was not pleasant. It scared me, really, as a kid. It scared me. You don't like to see that in your parents, because your parents push through, or mine did. They push through. They shield you from that. But it didn't stop him from skiing once he got well. He did not. He continued on, but probably if I knew, he was a little more cautious. But the cabin cruiser was a whole different kind of thing. That's where you would take it out. And I remember one day I was not in school, and so it was just myself and my parents, and which I loved. I was kind of a tag along shadow. I like doing that anyway. So in some of the photos that I have, which I don't have nearly enough, I'm the only one in a lot of them. Uh, I was their only child in the photos and with them, and but uh, my mom and dad, my mother packed a picnic, and we cruised. We were cruising around on Eagle Mountain, and we came up on a floating dock. Way out in the water. It was stationary, but a floating dock that had been weighted, and I got to sit on that floating dock and have my picnic. And they ate in the back of the boat right there by me, but I was on the floating dock, and I thought that was the biggest deal in the world. It's like I felt so grown up, so big. It was just it's such a happy memory for me. But after my dad uh, passed away, and the place on Lake Whitney that my parents had worked hard on and had landscaped and had a place, a small boathouse for one of the boats, and then a covering for the other attached to the house, but very tall to accommodate the small cabin cruiser. One of the boats got stolen after my dad passed away. It was taken, and but then there was a house fire that was electrical in nature. No one was there, but it literally burned the house and the two boats up. The house burned to the ground because it was a volunteer fire department, and being way out, uh, there was response time was very bad, and so the boats burned. The hulls were standing, but they were, still sitting on trailers, but burned up. Now I want to get back to that claw-footed tub, that cast iron claw-footed tub. The fire was so intense, it literally burned everything to the. I mean, the refrigerator, nothing was left except that claw-footed tub. That claw-footed tub was left, and we hired someone to come in and clean everything up, and we sold the property. Uh, but someone stopped by and wanted to have that tub because it could still be cleaned up, and it was still weighed a ton. So that's my entry about boating, and my father being a bit of a daredevil, but sometimes even daredevils get taken down a bit with a broken rib. I've always remembered his pain with that broken rib. So that's just yet another tale of my life and my father's tales.